This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Comfort is a very subjective situation that is unique to every individual on the planet. Looking at others through our eyes, we may question, how on earth could they enjoy that? We judge their life through our own feelings. Differences are what make the world go round and life worth living. As interesting as you believe that you are, with remarkable brevity, the conversation with yourself will stagnate and become boring. Learning through collaboration and celebrating our differences rather than battling over them. Over 7 billion people on the planet Earth, and there are 7 billion unique personalities. This is the miracle of life and the beauty of the human race. We do not have to affirm their lifestyle, but we must respect and accept the pursuit of happiness. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content. Now you can join. Follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. On this very special episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome some more travelers. Everybody's flying in these days, Mike. I don't know what's going on.
We should be flying out.
Yeah, we should be flying out. So we're going to do our next show on the road.
Now that the weather's warm here, we'll stay.
You will stay.
A lot of work taken on the road.
We welcome tonight Lexi Knight and her beautiful wife, Crystal, to discuss the suffering of a trans woman. We sort of just gave it away with all that stuff, but I really do appreciate you coming in.
Oh, my pleasure to be here. I'm honored.
Before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police, but we do trust them. So go to toyotahackensack.com. Let them find you a car. They're really good people over there. So Lexi and Crystal, each week, have you watched any of our episodes?
I've watched a few.
We watched a few. Each week we take a question from our audience.
You got sick of us already, so you stopped watching?
No, it's time for me. I don't have a lot of it.
You got to get a little backstory into how we operate. But this week's social media question comes from Harmony and Bones. What do people misunderstand about you? Lexi, I'm going to start this one off with you.
I think that the number one thing that people misunderstand about trans people is that it's somehow the word transsexual and trans seem to inherently go together. And so the one thing that people misunderstand about me or any of ours, is that it's sexual, that it's a fetish, it's a kink, some sort of sexual perversion, when in fact it's not.
There are those out there, but it's a different, some guys just
lifestyle.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not trans.
It's not living your life like I live my life like a very normal person. I have, chores to do, and, I got to take kids to school, pick them up, their activities, this, that, the other, and I have a job. Dreams and aspirations, pretty much like anybody else.
So in other words, you're telling me that you're a person. You're
I am.
A human being.
Believe it or not, I am.
Okay, because that was my first question. Are you an actual real human being? But
Nanu. I think so.
Wow, you are dating yourself.
I am. I'm very old.
Crystal, what do you think? So what is something that somebody misunderstands about you?
I think the biggest thing that they misunderstand is I got married for love, not for a situation.
Shits and giggles.
Yeah.
So you got married, so you didn't get married for love?
No, I did get married for
okay.
love.
Okay.
Most people ask, well, why did you stay?
Oh, yeah, because we're going to get into that whole story. And that's something I want to touch on with you. Mike, what do you think?
Most people think I'm mean. Yeah, they say I have resting Jersey face. Everybody thinks I'm never happy because I'm always happy, but I just don't smile. I don't show it outwardly. It's the way I am.
Something applicable to tonight. You'll see two people sitting here across the table from somebody who you wouldn't think we would accept into our lives. But as it turns out, because people will look at me, and I'm sure they do this with you as well, they will judge everybody by their appearance. They'll judge that book by its cover. And I love it when people judge books by their cover because it automatically gives you an advantage.
You're right.
They'll see me, they'll see my size, they'll see, and I'm not overly huge, I'm not like freakishly big, but they'll look at me and you're a big dumb football player. So number one, they think I'm stupid.
They're not wrong.
They're not wrong. So they'll think I'm stupid, which I love because now I automatically have an advantage against them. Okay, second thing is, and it applies to you, that we're not accepting of other people's lifestyle. I accept everybody.
Yep.
Hey, listen, You do you, and let me do me. Don't try to intrude on my life. I won't try to intrude on your life. And that's just the agreement we'll have.
Oh, it's amazing how many people like worry about how people live their lives these days. I couldn't care less about how you live your life, how anybody lives their lives. I'm worried about how I'm living ours.
Everybody's into everybody else's business.
Yeah,
leave me alone. Let me live the way I want to live.
Yeah. As long as you're happy, as long as you're living what you believe is your best life, I think that's the key to everything.
You only got one.
You only get one. So Harmony and Bones, thank you so much for sending that in. Keep sending in your questions. We will try to get them on the air. And what I want everybody to do is go out to 234 Franklin Avenue in Nutley, New Jersey. Go see Gus at Cubita Cafe. Some of the most delicious food you'll ever see. Mike was just there not that long ago, and he can attest to this. You will never have a bad meal. And if it is a bad meal, I'm sure Gus will make it right.
Tell him the Suffering Podcast sent you.
So go over to 234 Franklin Avenue in Nutley. Go see Gus at Cubita Cafe and check them out. You're not going to be disappointed. So, Lexi, here's another connection through Justin Case.
Yes.
I just spoke with him the other day.
I talk to Justin all the time. We love him. He is in our audience on our show, and God, he's an amazing person.
He logged on to
our Instagram Live tonight.
Before.
Last week, we had another one of his friends, Jersey Mike Faria, in here. So he's one of these people. You got to understand something. When people come into our studio, we really do take an interest in their lives. As long as they're not a jerk to us, and we haven't had that too much. We've had it, but it's not too bad. We become invested in their lives. And because of that relationship that we built, we're able to meet great people such as yourself. So we're very fortunate people. And I always want to, listen, I'm a big... anything Justin needs, like he can call me and I'll step up and help him.
Fantastic individual. We talk quite a bit.
So why don't you give our audience a little bit about the way you grew up? Because I don't want to give away the whole bag of nuts yet. I had to say that. I'm sorry.
I was happy to give that away. So
I'm usually the one that says those inappropriate things.
I know. So you're gonna find that when we get uncomfortable, we'll make these stupid little jokes. Don't take offense to it, please.
None taken. I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to offend me.
It's nice to know you're uncomfortable, though.
There are certain questions that are going to make me a little uncomfortable tonight because I've never had the freedom to ask what I want to ask. I'm curious.
Can you imagine being uncomfortable?
No.
No, me neither.
I'm
Inquiring minds want to know.
Right?
But I'm curious about these things, and you have been so gracious to open up your lives to us.
Yes.
And really answer those questions. And what my hope is people will become more accepting. They don't have to affirm what you do or your lifestyle, but we want them to accept you as a human being. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit of how you grew up?
Well, I grew up the typical suburban childhood, like most people. My father was a devout Catholic, married to my mom, and our grandmother lived with us. And I had a brother that grew up with me. We grew up pretty normal suburban neighborhood. The only difference
2.5 kids and a dog.
Pretty much,
a white picket fence.
Mm-hmm. The only difference about my childhood was what happened behind the closed doors. That's where things get a little complicated for me. My father was not a kind man, not to me anyway. Everything was great right up until my parents got divorced. When my parents got divorced, that's when my life turned to shit.
And what age are we talking about here?
About 6 or 7.
All right. And what part of the country did you grow up in?
I grew up in Massachusetts, Central Mass.
Oh, so you're a New Englander. Okay.
I am, yeah.
Can you still turn on the Boston, Massachusetts accent?
Park my car in Harvard Yard next to the garage, bottle of water.
Yeah.
I sure can.
Okay, you'll fit in real well with the Hoboken crowd.
You a Red Sox fan?
I don't give a crap about sports.
Okay.
Couldn't care less.
All right, so as long as you're not a Patriots or a Red Sox fan, you're good in this.
You could stay.
Yeah. So at 6 or 7 years old, this family unit that you always thought was just going to be there forever sort of just dissipates. What happened between your parents?
My parents got divorced. I was in kindergarten when my parents got divorced. And I remember coming home that afternoon, and God, I can still see it like it was yesterday. But my mom was walking out my front door, the front door of the house, walking out with hangers, all right? Tons of hangers. And so I remember getting off the bus and asking my mom what she was doing. She's like, I'm leaving your father, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, me telling me, and I want to go with my mom. Because I just wasn't comfortable around my father. I didn't want to do all the things my father did, like my mom was my mom, But nonetheless, they divorced over Well, I mean, he's dead. I guess I can talk about it. So,
He's not going to say anything bad about you.
no, he really isn't. But according to my mother, my father was a cross-dresser. My father was not good to her. He hit her, according to her. And so they got divorced.
So he was a cross-dresser.
Yeah, there's more about that as we tell my story.
Well, was it a sexual fetish type of thing?
I don't think so. No, I don't think it was a fetish. I think my father was just like me.
Really?
And I think that's why, as I grew up, my father tried to, quote, beat the manhood into me. I think that happened to him as a child. I think that his father beat him and turned him into what he was today, or, well, was. And so as I grew up, the more I screamed girl, you know, because I had Cabbage Patch dolls and stuffies, and, you know, I didn't want to play with Matchboxes or G.I. Joes. I didn't want to go out and play with dump trucks at that rate. I wanted to hang out with my mom. I wanted to cook. I wanted to do the things that kids did then, you know, tea parties and dresses and Barbie dolls, this, that, the other. Stuff that was stereotypical when I was younger that was more girls geared. And today it's kind of, you know, everything. But
So
Do you think your father did that on purpose because he didn't want you growing up the way that he grew up?
I think I don't know. I don't know if he saw, I'm almost positive that he saw me or him inside of me and tried to prevent that. But times were changing as we were growing up.
I was going to say,
there was no word
do you think
for it.
maybe he was actually gay, but it wasn't really socially acceptable back then, so he tried to
I think
be
my
the man?
father was actually trans. I don't think he was gay. I'm sure he loved women, as far as I knew anyway. But I think that he was trans, and it was you know, instilled into him to pretty much beat out of him.
what years are we talking about? What, 70s, 80s?
We're talking the early 80s. So
It was just starting to come in.
yeah.
But you have somebody, if he were to come out openly about that, you got to talk. You're right in the middle of the AIDS epidemic,
That's right.
and AIDS was like a catching disease for anybody who wasn't straight when it first came out.
I remember watching my father the night that Reagan said to Gorbachev, tear the wall down. Like, I remember that. He was downstairs reloading ammunition, and he was on this little 13-inch black and white television. I remember watching it sitting right there.
No kidding.
Yeah. That was about the right time.
It's
So.
a real interesting nature versus nurture argument.
Mm-hmm.
You know, was your desire to be a woman, was that passed down genetically? Was it environmental? Was there something your father was doing that led you in that direction? It's a nice little case study.
You know, that's a good question. There's actually studies that have said that being trans is actually passed down genetically.
And so have you?
Did he pass down any of his dresses to you?
No, my father was much larger than I was. But Gigi Gorgeous, she did a YouTube thing with some people not too long ago. That I think it's called The Science of Trans. It's a really good piece, about 4 minutes long. It explains a lot.
You know, a lot of people always want to say that it's nature, right? It's nature because if you're feeling this way, it's easier for you to say that you were born this way than you were turned this way, right? Because people think if you were turned this way, you can be unturned this way. That's why you have a lot of gay conversion therapy and things like that. But yeah, God, psychologists would love to get a hold of you.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, some people think that my life is the way it is because of, you know, abuse, but that wasn't anything to do with it, because a few years prior to my parents getting divorced, I had actually walked up to my mom. My mom was a paramedic. She worked during the day. And so I had actually walked up to my mom. She was sleeping that morning, and I woke her up. I remember walking around the bed to her. My father had this big king-size waterbed. And I remember walking up to her and going, Mommy, 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 Mommy. You know, and I remember waking her up. My mom always slept in the nude, so it was really different, you know. And it was like, I kind of handed my mom a pair of scissors, and I looked at her and said, "Mommy, cut it off." You know, I didn't want my penis, you know. And I told my, you know,
It's like my favorite part of myself.
I had no attachment. To me, it was more of a skin tag.
Skin
But I swear to God, I was so
like
happy
a
it was
big
gone.
pimple.
Yeah, exactly. It was really annoying. It's part of my life. But I remember telling my mom, cut it off, you know, and she, you know, she'd look at me and she'd say, you know, well, you can't do that. You know, you're a boy, blah, blah, blah. But what steered me away a lot of that was about 2 weeks later, we're talking Memorial Day time. My father used to have these big clam bakes where he would have, you know, the whole family over and et cetera. And I remember sitting at the table after this was all done. We had a breezeway between our garage and our porch. And I remember sitting in the very back corner. And my mom sat here, I sat here. It was my brother and then my dad. And then family over here and another table behind us or whatever. And I remember my mom saying, you know, do you know what your son said to me the other day right in front of everybody? And I just instantly, you know that warm feeling you get when you're about to be embarrassed? That one, I remember having that and kind of sliding down onto my chair, you know? And I knew where she was going with this right away. And I'm only like 6 years old. And she says, your son told me the other day that he wanted to cut his penis off. And I remember everybody just stopping and looking at me. And
like a fart in church.
Yeah,
mortifying.
It was, you know, if you can mortify a 6-year-old, that was the time to mortify a 6-year-old. And I remember crawling under the table and crawling back out and going up to the end of the house. My father looks at me and goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm not hungry anymore." And he goes, "No, you're going to sit your ass down and you're going to eat. And we'll talk about this later." Well, later wasn't good. Later got my ass kicked. But, you know, how can you embarrass me in front of the family, et cetera, et cetera? It's like, whoa. I'm thinking to myself, I didn't say it. She did.
Yeah, she
You know, what the hell?
I said that in confidence, woman.
Yeah, well, that was kind of it. You know, I thought I could talk to my mom about anything back then, but I guess that just didn't pan out. So there was that.
Well, so your mother obviously knew that your father had these tendencies to dress as a woman, and I don't think your mother liked it, apparently.
Well, clearly no. She divorced him a few years later.
Right, so...
I think they were married 12 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Now, what was the final straw with your parents getting divorced?
I don't know. I never asked my mom. I'm guessing it was my father probably hitting her, treating her like ass.
Do you think it had anything to do with him dressing as a woman?
I think that's part of it. My mom's told me some stories over the years, so yeah, I think that's part of it.
Wow.
Instead of going out to dinner, taking his wife out to dinner, he'd throw a dress on and go to some
Now, do you think that would,
cross-dress function.
if you would have seen your father as a woman, like say you just walk in the bedroom, do you think it would have given you a different view of your father?
I don't know. That's a great question because I found out some information later, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that was quite stunning on his deathbed.
Really?
Yes.
That he let go of?
He did. He let go of it. I'll just tell the story now. I walked in to see my father. I hadn't spoken to him in 7 years. And I walked in to see him. My brother called me and said, Dad's dying. I said, okay, well, what's the deal? He goes, I don't know. He's got something going on with his heart. With his heart, this, that, and whatever. I said, okay. So I talked to her, and we talked for a little while, and we decided to go and to see him. And he had never seen me as Lexi, I heard that he had watched my TikToks, this, that, the other, but he's never seen me in person, And so I dressed to the nines. I looked my best. And I went up to see him, and I had asked the lady at the front desk. I said, "Hey, I'm here to see, such and such." And she goes, "Okay, well, she's down the hall on the right." And I didn't think anything of it. My father had long hair back then, so I just didn't think anything of it. I just said, "Oh, maybe she just looked at the picture real quick and said, down the right, whatever." Well, when we get to the door, on the door it said Jen.
Really?
Yeah, and I looked at my wife. I said, "What the fuck? Like, wait, what?" And my father was in the bathroom at that time, and my brother was in the room. I said, "What's up with the Jen on the door?" He goes, "Oh, well, Dad will have to tell you that." And I'm just not getting in the middle of it. He says, "Okay, well, my brother seems to be very." He's very standoffish when it comes to this type of thing. And he's like that because secretly my brother is bisexual and he doesn't ever want to be happy. And, well, I mean, listen, I don't care if he knows or doesn't know. I know he's bisexual. And he knows he's bisexual, but for his own image and his own, quote, manhood, my brother runs a tree company. So for his own image and his own manhood, you got to be rough and tumble. You can't be bisexual, apparently.
That's not an effeminate job.
No, it's not. No, and he's been caught a few times with guys, whatever. But that's a whole nother thing.
Whole nother episode.
Yeah, exactly. I love my brother.
Now.
Yeah, not a secret now. It's never been a secret. Believe me, everybody knows him, knows it. So that being said, anyway, he didn't really have anything to say about it. And then I asked my father, and my father talked about, he had wanted to transition, and he was going to transition. I don't know if my father had caught reality yet that he was going to die. No matter what, he was going to die, and he wasn't going to live long at all. But he wanted the transition, and I was shocked. But I think the thing that pissed me off the most about going up to see him is he didn't really want to know anything about me. He made that shit all about him,
which is really bizarre.
Yeah, you haven't seen him. You haven't seen your kid in 7 years, and you don't want to know anything about them.
Yeah, but he didn't ask me much. Matter of fact, the first words out of his mouth were what?
Hit her.
Hit her.
I had made a joke to try to ease the tension, and he looked at her and said, hit him for me, will you?"
Oh, wow.
That's the first words out of his mouth. I don't see you in 7 fucking years. You want to beat on me some more?
But
Thanks.
But that's really insane because now you have something. Father and son didn't seem like you meshed real well. You
No,
said
we
your father was just not a kind person.
Not to me, he wasn't.
There was a reason why he wasn't a kind person. And now, how old was he when he passed?
Shit, he just turned 70.
And so he's 70 years old, and he's finally wanting to transition to become comfortable in his own skin. What can you think of a more tragic life? The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherrie Allsup is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherrie on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherrie has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherrie's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherrie will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherrie's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques, uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherrie also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherrie Allsup, go to sherrieallsup.com. That's SherrieAllsup.com.
No.
Yeah, he was hiding his whole life.
He was.
And now that he's on his deathbed, he comes to realization that he wants to.
Well, the stories I heard after he died were crazy. Even his second wife had caught him, and this, that, whatever, and he got picked up for prostitution. God, it was like, I can't even remember when that was. It was way back when.
He was prostituting himself?
I don't know if he was prostituting himself or if he was looking.
Or if he was a John.
But I know that when he was picked up in women's clothing.
Wow.
That I do know. And he still managed to be married to my stepmother. And they stayed married for 30 effing years.
Wow.
Yep, until they finally split. He lived in Arizona, and he moved in with my brother in South Carolina. What was that? About 2016, 17, we heard?
I don't know.
Yeah, it was right around. It was after. I knew that by then I was already homeless. But I know he had moved in with my brother or whatever the case was, and he lived with my brother for a long time, and I still never spoke to him.
So let's go back. Your parents get divorced. You are now living with your father?
I'm living with my father, yes.
Why didn't your mother take you?
My father had a better attorney.
Okay, so he fought for custody.
So that was
Why, I have no idea.
That was court appointed.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah, he took her to the cleaners. He was so mean, he put my mother in jail for a year.
Really?
So my being a father, if something were to go, like if I knew my wife's 5'2", so this isn't really my son's 6'3".
My mom's like 5'2".
Right. So if I knew my wife was an alcoholic, abuser, there is no way in the world that I would leave my kids. You said that your father had hit your mother, so she knows he's got that violence in him.
Yes.
Why would she, I understand that it's legal. I understand you got to do what the courts say, but damn, you got to protect your kids at all costs.
Yeah, he took my mom for a ride. She had nothing. My mother was poor. She never had anything throughout the year. She was working, one job trying to make it, and she lived in a little one-bedroom apartment after, she left him, whatever, and she took a long time to actually recover. She finally, my mom's doing well now. She owns a house, this, that, whatever, but, it took her a long time to get out of that. It wasn't until probably mid-90s before she recovered, because like I said, my father put her in jail for a year over child support. Fucking money. My father had plenty of it. Plenty.
Yeah. So you kept in contact with your mother this whole time? That she was never an absent mother?
No. She always tried to be there for us kids unless my father manipulated her.
And you're now at this time, is your father being physically abusive to you?
Yes.
Okay, walk us through one of those incidents that you can recall.
Well, I mean, it could have been anything. One incident in specific, I had said something to my father, and he'd backhand me. Or there was one time where I had said something, I don't remember what the hell it was, but I had said something, and my father, said, well, you say that again, I'll wash your mouth out with soap. Like, okay, whatever. So, of course, I say it again. Like every other kid. Yeah, screw you, you ain't gonna do nothing, right?
Soap poisoning.
Yes, right. So he did it anyway. He grabbed the soap. He chased me around, and my father had this tendency. I'm actually really claustrophobic now because of it. But he had this tendency to put me on the ground, and he would sit on my waist and put his knees on my shoulders. Is that a cop move?
No.
Okay, well, he'd put his knees on my shoulders.
That's an older brother move. My brother used to do that to me all the time.
All right, well, he'd do that shit, and then he'd block his shins on my arms so I couldn't move. I mean, and he would just beat the shit out of me. And so I remember getting up, and the soap was in my mouth, and I remember my grandmother was in the kitchen cooking, and my father was on the other side of the counter. We were in the dining room when this happened, and I threw the soap at my father. Like, I was pissed, you know? And the coward ducked. Who did I hit?
Your grandmother.
Your grandma.
Holy shit, did I take a beating from that? So much so that I ran and hid underneath. Like, we were going throughout the house. Tables are flying. Shit's flying everywhere. I go underneath my grandmother's bed. My father comes in. He flips the fucking bed up, just grabs me and starts beating the shit out of me. And it's like, wow. And I know that, you know, there's so many times, if you pay attention to me, and a lot of your guests will probably pay attention to me, you'll notice I only smile with half of my face, right? That's because of all the damage I have in my left. You know, I've broken my orbital socket, you know, from him. I've got permanent nerve damage in my face. Just all kinds of shit, like just a brutal childhood. And finally, there was one day, I was 12 or 13 years old, and we were on the porch, and my father had slammed my head into a concrete stair. I remember I was wearing a pair of jeans. I had no socks and shoes, no shirt, no nothing, and I was bleeding profusely from my head. And I ran out that door, and I never went back. I ran to my mom's house. The cops picked me up. They brought me back. I ran again. And that was going to be the end of it. My father just said, that's it, I'm done. And my stepmother told me she fucking hated me anyway. So, I mean, what is the problem? You know?
Was he the same way with your brother also?
No, my brother never took a beating like I did.
Really?
Never.
So are you still exhibiting these tendencies to become a woman? Or did he literally beat that out of you for a short time?
He beat it out of me for a short time.
You know, it's just better just to stay quiet.
Yeah.
You know, it's not worth it. But you're probably still feeling it though, right?
Oh, very much so, yeah. You know, anytime I even thought of asking for anything, you know, feminine, you know, it just wasn't happening. I mean, when I was, 7 years old, I asked for an Easy Bake Oven 2 years in a row. Still never got one, damn it. But
Easy Bake Ovens are cool. That's no joke.
Yeah, I know. She tells me horror stories about the things, too, but I didn't care. I wanted one.
I used to ask for a Susie Homemaker. It was like an oven like that, too.
Yep, I mean, I wanted one. I never got the damn thing. I got an RC car. I got an RC car and that Nintendo 8-bit system. You know, a lot of people going, wait, you got a fucking Nintendo? Yeah, look, believe me, I got a Nintendo. Yeah, I didn't want it. So I didn't care about any of that shit. You know, I wanted girl shit, you know, and my best friend,
I'm going to argue with you here. Easy Bake Oven is not girl shit.
All right, fair enough.
It's not girl shit.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of men out there to cook. Absolutely. I agree.
Absolutely.
You make some good shit in those. Trust me, I had one in college.
You had an Easy Bake Oven in college?
It was, and guess what? Everybody eventually came into my room to have a cake, especially when they were high.
And nothing wrong with it. Yeah, well, the munchies will do it to you.
Yeah.
They let you eat anything.
Yeah.
So, I had a best friend. She was a girl growing up. Her name was Lexi, and I'll tell that story later. But she was my best friend right up until I was, she was 11. I was 11. Unfortunately, she died of leukemia. But that being said, she had all the girly stuff. So her and I were like two peas in a pod. I was always over her house any chance I could. You know, we met on the very first day of kindergarten of all times to meet. She just moved in over the summer. I had no idea. You know. Anyway, so yeah, and
was she accepting? Did you open up to her?
I did, and I stayed close to her parents right up until they died. I was really close to her parents. Her parents treated me like I wanted to be treated.
So. Was she the first person outside of your mother when you got a little older? I'm not talking about saying kid things. I want to cut it off. That's kind of a kid thing.
I don't think I told her until I was like 8.5, 9.
What did that feel like?
I was scared. I mean, I had known her since I was like 6, so I was a little nervous to tell her. I always entertained her at the house. We played, with her toys, whatever, and we just didn't think anything of it. She just thought I was her friend playing, but that's what I wanted to do. That's why I went to her house, and we didn't go to my house. You know what I mean?
Say, kids could be judgmental.
They can, but we were so close and pretty much knew everything about each other. Like we were two peas in a pod. We were almost inseparable.
So you were scared, but you finally get this off your chest to an outside person, afraid of their reaction because you don't want to be judged.
I was afraid to lose her as a friend. Yeah.
Right. What was her reaction?
She gave me a big hug, and she just cried.
That's cool. That's cool.
She was really cool. Her parents were great.
That's a good friend.
Yeah, no doubt.
Especially at 8 years old to have the mental maturity in order to accept your friend for who they are.
Her parents were hippie-like. They were pretty badass. They were really cool people. They died about, God, what are we 2024 now? They died in 2017. But they were amazing people.
So you leave the house, 12, 13 years old. Your father slams your head into the concrete. You leave. You come back. Where do you go?
I went back to my mom's.
And did your mother accept you in to
Yes.
stay?
Yes.
And that's where you stayed?
That's where I stayed. My stepfather told my father that if he steps on the property again, he'd kill him.
So your stepfather was pretty cool with you? He's a good guy?
Yeah, he is now. Yeah, my stepfather was always good to me, growing up. And, of course, he didn't really find out about this whole trans thing until 2017 or so. And now he's pretty cool about it. Last time I saw him, he goes, well, I'd like to tell you nothing's changed, but I'd be lying. Because we
Got a
had
flair for the obvious.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. But he treated me, he gendered me correctly. He calls me Lexi. I mean, he's not disrespectful in any means. For a 75-year-old man, he's very kind. Probably the best role model for a father I had.
See, that's nice. At least you had some sort of stability, because it didn't seem like you were getting it too much with your father.
It took me a long time to get it.
But you're still hiding this stuff, right? You're still hiding this stuff, and it's got to present itself in a certain way because you're getting into the puberty stage.
Oh, God.
And puberty kids have a tendency to act out in very strange ways.
Puberty was terrible for me.
I'm still going through it, so I'll let you know how.
Me too, actually.
You're going in reverse.
I am doing it in reverse. You're right.
Yours is a newfound puberty.
So it is.
So what were some of your coping mechanisms in order to deal with what was going on inside of you?
Music helped. I was very hateful. I did a lot of, my mother signed me up for a lot of sports. I played ice hockey and football, all the boy stuff, right? And so I did a lot of that, and
You're probably tough as hell from what your father put you through.
Well, I got 3 black belts, actually. So that was kind of my outlet, was martial arts growing up. So
Your Boston accent just came through.
Martial arts.
Did you hear that?
I did.
I picked it up right away.
Yeah.
You got to point that out, Crystal. Every time Lexi says something, it's martial arts.
Oh, she loves
I
correcting
laugh
me.
at her all the time.
She loves to correct me. But martial arts was
any
my
good
big
wife.
outlet.
Like any good wife. You think you're going to be different? No.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
No, she can keep up with the rest of them, I assure you.
So you had martial arts. Is any bad behavior start to creep in?
I got into a lot of trouble in school. Yeah, I was, fighting, suspended for this, suspended for that, lashing out here, screaming at teachers, telling teachers to fuck off, I was bullied a lot in school because I was very feminine. So I was bullied a lot in school. I actually ended up dropping out my senior year. Wow. I dropped out of high school because I was just so sick and tired of getting fucking bullied and so many fights. And it was just so much. For me, it was like one fight a fucking week, for Christ's sakes.
So to put it into terms that our audience might be able to understand, when people found out that you went to high school with, that you transitioned, were they the type of people who went, well, that kind of makes sense?
I don't know. I haven't spoken to any of them.
Okay.
I was long moved by then.
Because there's certain people
Got no reunions coming up right now.
I figured I didn't like them then. I ain't going to like you now.
So there's certain people I grew up with that either went gay. There was like 3 of them that went to the child molestation thing, and every single one of them that it happened to, you're like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense.
After, it's funny you said that, because after Lexi died and I made my way to middle school, and I was in the 6th grade, 7th grade when she died, and I made my new friend about a year later. His name was Mike, and I actually wouldn't have had a clue. But Mike is gay. Mike is gay, and he lives as a gay man today. He's a wonderful human being with my friend Audra, and it's pretty amazing.
So my grandfather used to tell me, my grandfather, for being an older guy, World War II vet, he was a very progressive thinking man. Mm-hmm. So you're talking early 80s. So he would tell me this. I've said this before on the show. There was a big thing in Atlantic City, in the area that I grew up in, where there was a gay club, and outside of the gay club, guys used to get beat up all the time. And he would come to me, and after this big news broke, and he says, "Listen, don't ever get into a fight with a gay guy." He goes,
"You got nothing to win."
It's a no-win situation, because it's either you beat up a gay guy, so what, or you got beat up by a gay guy, which you're going to get your chops busted for the rest of your life. And he goes, "Let me tell you something. That is a tough lifestyle. You got to remember, this is 80s. It's a different mindset."
Oh, completely.
That is a different. That is not a choice. There is no choice in that, because it's a detriment being that way now. So nobody would choose to have a detriment in their life if they could avoid it.
Oh, God, right.
And I never forgot that lesson. I really never forgot that lesson. It's a little different now. Like my kids, it's just commonly accepted with
It
my
should be.
kids. So they don't even think about it. But you found out somebody was gay when I was young. You're like, oh my God, they're going to die of AIDS. That's what you thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about the AIDS pandemic and epidemic, I guess.
It was like they had the
cooties.
cooties too.
Yeah, nobody would touch
go
them.
near them, touch them.
Well, Ryan White, great example.
Ryan White, Arthur Ashe, and all of a sudden all these straight people started getting in like, whoa.
And then Magic Johnson.
Magic Johnson.
He's still alive today.
But he's got the good AIDS.
Tell me that's not a conspiracy.
He's got the good AIDS. He's got the magic. Like I said, I always say, Magic Johnson got the good AIDS, the one you can survive from. But now AIDS, you can live forever with AIDS.
Non-detectable now, yeah.
You know, the funny thing I heard is Magic Johnson stole the best porn name that could be out there.
Yeah, yes.
Magic Johnson.
Magic Johnson, yeah, I can see that.
So at some point you're in high school. Is there any other coping mechanisms? Drinking, drugs, any of that?
I mean, I went through, the normal stuff that every teenager does. I did my days of drinking, I would hang out with my friends on the weekends. We go, I grew up in Gardner, Massachusetts, and behind downtown, there used to be an old Gem Industries building. I don't even know what the hell Gem Industries did to this day. I still don't freaking know. But there was Gem Industries and had this dock that was back there behind the pool hall. And we'd hang out there. We'd smoke dope, we'd drink, do it.
hang
Yeah,
out.
I'd be out.
Typical high school shit.
Yeah, I mean, from the time I moved in with my mom, I don't think I was ever home. Once I moved in with her, I found kind of a whole new niche of friends, if you will, and I don't think I was ever home. I was always out, but when I was out, I was always doing shit I shouldn't do. I'm snorting coke, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and it worked. It was great. Got me through my teen years just fine. Coke was one of those things I did. I could take it or leave it. Even when I did it in my 20s, take it or leave it, didn't give a shit.
But did any of the drug use get out of control?
No, I don't think so. Not until later in life.
What's later in life?
Well, later in life, I had actually hurt myself. My wife at the time that I was married to, Kathy, we had decided that we wanted to move from Massachusetts. We were just tired of it. We were tired of the cold weather, this, that, whatever. And she wanted to change. So did I. And that there became my quote gypsy lifestyle. And so,
Gypsy's a protected class now. You can't say gypsy anymore.
oh, really?
Yeah. Which I'm going to say gypsy all day long just because
Oh,
I can't
okay.
say it.
I'm going to say it because that's the only way people recognize somebody who moves around a lot. So, and I don't mean any
nomads,
offense, but-
gypsies.
Yeah, you can't say
Yeah,
it.
nomad. Call it a nomad, right? And so we moved to Arizona, and when I moved to Arizona, I mean, just life changed for everything. But unfortunately, I'd hurt myself driving. I was one of those stubborn guys that tried to man up all the fucking time. I didn't know how to take a break, so I always pushed my body beyond limits. Yeah, right, exactly. You pop in. I remember when we got to Arizona, I was drinking those big, tall, 32-ounce monsters, popping frickin' no dose. Like, I get there, my heart's going, so hard, and it's like, holy shit. Like, I felt like I was on speed, for Christ's sakes. And so, I didn't have a drug problem at this time, but I did hurt a nerve in my right leg.
Oh.
Yeah, and I put up with it for a long time. And then I finally went to see a doctor about it. It was so... God, it was so intense, like to the point I couldn't even stand up anymore, And so I went to see a doctor, and that's when the Percocet started.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was taking one every 6 to 8 hours or as needed. Well, one became two.
You're
two
probably
became
talking
three.
late 90s, maybe early 2000s?
No, I'm talking early 2000s.
So the doctors were at this point were just prescribing.
They were still prescribing them, yeah.
It became 1 an hour.
It did, but after about 3 at a whack, I noticed that she went away.
Really?
She went away. It instantly suppressed her. But then after a while, 3 wasn't enough, so I take another.
Well, you got to be careful saying that. Some of these idiots out there are going to give people who want to transition some Percocet, try to make it go away.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because once you go clean, you're fucked. So.
I want to step back in time a little bit. You're still having these feelings like you're a female inside.
Yes.
Did you ever once think to yourself, well, maybe I'm just gay?
I did, actually. I did. In my early 20s, I tried to be with a man just to see if I was gay. I couldn't do it.
Hurt?
No, I couldn't get over the stigma of being a man.
Yeah.
Men don't do that. Blah blah blah. Exit only. Yada yada yada. That shit.
But
Tough guy.
You said you did not like your penis.
Right.
Was it a hate for all penises or just yours?
Oh, I hated my penis. I don't care what anybody else does with theirs. I couldn't care less,
Okay.
But I mean, it was just maybe that was the case for me. Maybe I was gay. I don't know. I mean, you have all these feelings. You don't know what they are. I mean, like I said, puberty was a nightmare for me. I didn't know what the hell to do. My friends are telling me how they want to have babies, this, that, the other, and I'm thinking, well, fuck, I can't do that. What the hell? Why am I like this? And every psychologist I ever went to, my parents tried to put me in therapy. My father, in specifically, back then, HIPAA didn't exist, so my father always found everything I talked about anyway. But they would always tell me, it's perfectly okay to wonder what it's like to be the other gender. It's totally fucking normal. Have either one of you ever wondered what it's like to be a fucking girl?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No.
And so that's what they would tell me. And
It seems like a lot of work. I'm going to
Yeah,
tell you
no
that.
kidding.
it is a lot of work.
It seems like women got the raw deal. You got the long hair, which is a pain in the ass in hot weather. All right? Yeah,
Fair enough.
You have to shave everything. Well,
Laser's wonderful.
but and you got to do makeup and stuff. It just seems like a lot.
I spent an hour getting ready before I ever came here.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a lot of
Took
work.
me about 3 minutes.
All that hair gel you had to put in.
Took her about 3 minutes too. She's the same way. She doesn't like makeup and all that stuff. I don't blame her.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of work. But I'm sorry to digress with
No.
that. But that's a question when you're wondering where you sit in this world. Well, if I feel like a female inside, everything's telling me I'm gay.
I thought I might have been, but I remember I had hooked up with somebody, and we pretty much got our clothes off, and I tried a few things here and there, and it's like, yeah, this isn't for me, dude. And I let it up, but I couldn't get over. I couldn't get over that macho-ness, that fuck that, I can't do this shit,
This stuff that your father beat into your head.
Yes.
So, your first kiss, okay, your first kiss with either a man,
was a
woman,
girl.
It was a girl. You feel, there. It's hard to explain, but everybody will know what I'm talking about.
Fireworks.
Yes.
The spark. Okay, this is for me or this isn't for me. Because I've heard this from other gay men we've had on where they've tried to go with women and it just didn't feel right.
Right.
Mark.
You feel like pressured into it almost.
Right.
Yeah.
So our friend Mark, he's like, yeah, it's just I tried. It just wasn't there for me. I just had no interest in it. So I imagine it was the same thing for you. You can't fit the round peg into a square hole, and that's what you were trying to do.
Yes. I'm going to turn the clock back a little bit, and this is a real trigger warning for your audience. Back when I was 11 years old, I talked my father into letting me volunteer at a pet store that wasn't far from my home, Park Hill Plaza. And it was a cute little pet store. They sold birds and puppies and just little stuff. And I go up there after school, I'm just trying to stay away from my father. Anything I could fucking do to get away from this man. And I went up there and I volunteered for a little while. Well, after a little while, the man raped me. He sexually molested me and raped me.
Really?
It was brutal. It was the most brutal thing I'd ever had. But the problem with that is I was afraid to tell my father. I couldn't tell my father.
How old were you?
I was 11 years old.
And, Jesus.
We were feral. Things were different back then. We could do whatever the fuck we wanted.
Yeah, but rape is rape.
I don't disagree with you.
And
Exactly.
and what was his justification for doing this?
I didn't ask him.
He just took it by force.
Well, he started molesting me first, even after I'd heard stories on TV about all that stuff, and I'm
After
like,
school
that'll-
specials?
Yeah, those. The more you know.
Yeah.
Grooming.
Right. And I didn't really think anything of it. I'd be like, that never happened to me, blah, 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 when I'm younger. And of course it did. And I didn't even think about it. It just fucking happened. And I didn't think anything of it, and
So this guy just does what he does to you.
yes.
And you I'm sure at 11, 12 years old, you're crying, you're screaming, you're trying to get away, you're trying to do anything you can, or do you just stay silent? Just let it happen.
I kind of stayed silent. I was so used to getting beat, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just thought this was normal to be treated like a fucking asshole. I was just so beat all my life, so
You never told anybody about it?
I never told anybody. Just her.
That's a pretty awful story.
Yeah, it was so traumatic. I actually tucked it away. I didn't really resurface until about 3.5 years ago.
And I don't even know how old you are now. I know
I'm 46.
You're 46. So 3 years, mid early 40s. That's usually about the time sexual assault as a child starts to rear its head for a lot of people.
Yeah. Hormones really made it come out hard.
Yeah, and you've had to deal with that in your adult life.
Yes.
Yeah, that sucks.
It's something you haven't dealt with your whole life. Now in your adult life.
Well, to be honest, I've yet to really deal with it.
And that's the type of person who would do something like that. Probably didn't even. If you were to ask him if he's straight or gay, he'd be straight. Probably married.
You're probably right, yeah.
Yeah, you're probably married.
Because it's not about sex.
I think the man's still alive today, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a special place in hell for him.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always a special place in hell for people who do that to children.
I don't disagree with you.
The devil's waiting.
Yeah. So they're going to get his just desserts, but that's absolutely awful. And since in your adult life, have you told your mother about it?
My mother actually found out when I came out on TikTok about it.
Really?
Yeah.
What was her reaction?
She was kind of shocked. She had no idea. She didn't really make a whole big thing of it because, I'm 40 years old. What's she going to do at this fucking point, right?
Exactly.
So, but she didn't make a big deal about it. I just remember getting a phone call about it. We talked about it a little bit, and she goes, "Why didn't you tell me?" It's like, because I was afraid to tell everybody. I didn't want to be that kid.
So if I learned anything,
Well, it's got to be an embarrassing thing too. I mean,
Well, yeah.
even to come out and say it,
I was a tiny kid. I've always been tiny. I mean, you guys see me now. I'm only 5'5", 5 feet, 5.5 inches. I weigh 168 pounds. I've always been small. All the males in my family, amazingly enough, are over 6 feet tall. My brother's 6'1". My father was 6'2". All my uncles were over 6 feet. I'm the smallest person with a penis in my family, for Christ's sake. It's just always been like that.
you were.
I was.
You
Yes, I was.
So one of our sponsors is that woman named Sherrie Allsup, who's an incest survivor, and I've really learned a lot from her on dealing with sexual assault victims. Like you said, like your mother asked you, why didn't you run away? Why didn't you do this? Well, I was fucking 11 or 12.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just trying to survive, and when you go through serious trauma, especially as a child, you just shut down.
Yes.
Like, why didn't you fight back? I would have.
Fuck was I going to do? He was like 6 feet tall. What was I going to do?
Clark said the same thing too.
People
Just shut right down.
You just shut down, and people would say, well, he made me blow him. Well, why didn't you bite his dick off? Well, because I wasn't
thinking.
Wasn't
You don't
thinking
think.
that. No.
You're scared to death. You don't think. You just lock up. You freeze.
Oh gosh. So you have
You ever fear something? You get that weakness in your legs, like you want to run, but you're so afraid
Your
you
knees feel
can't.
wobbly.
That. It's the same fucking feeling. You're
Every
so
time I
fucking
fly.
scared. Well, I love the fly. It doesn't bother me. But that was the feeling I had. I shut down. I didn't know what to do. I just panicked. My whole brain just fucking shut off.
Now, fast forward a little bit.
Yeah.
You're living your life. You're doing the best you can. You're married. You have
I had
children.
kids, 3 kids.
You have 3 kids. You're living everything normal. When did this inside in you start to become on the outside? When did you first? Do you remember the first time you dressed as a woman?
I do, actually. I had separated from my wife at that point. We just weren't. I was on drugs, really heavy, and I wasn't.
No wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
I was on a lot of drugs, and I wasn't really attentive to her. She started cheating on me, this, that, the other, and I don't fucking blame her. It ain't her fucking fault. I was in my head and
Lexi,
paying no attention to her.
I'm going to tell you something. That is one of the most mature, intelligent things I think anybody I've sat across has said. I really admire what you just said about your ex-wife right there.
Yeah, I can't blame her. I was the least attentive husband that I possibly could have been.
So that's a big ownership right there.
Yeah.
So
I take full ownership on that one. Obviously, it takes 2. I get that, but she could have sat down and talked to me, whatever. But no, I take ownership of that. That was my problem.
Yeah.
So you're separated from your wife. Do you just like throw on a skirt?
No, actually, I hadn't even done it yet. I did not dress as a woman until I got clean off of drugs. I had OD'd twice, and I was 33 years old. I had seen something about being trans on TV, whatever. And I'm like, Jesus Christ! It was like watching myself. I don't remember what it was. It was Dateline, Nightline, whatever the fuck it was. But I remember watching it and going, wow, that's really me.
Were the drugs hiding her?
The drugs were definitely hiding her, and they were suppressing her really good.
Yeah.
And like I said, I had OD'd twice. And then one morning, I don't know what the fuck happened, but one morning I woke up and I looked at my hand. For whatever reason, I turned the light on that morning. I used to just take them like half a fucking sleep, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock, whatever it was. And that morning I turned the light on. And I remember looking at my hand, I had 15 10 milligram Percocets in my hand. 15 of those fucking things. And I thought to myself, Lex, what the fuck are you doing to yourself? You're dying, dude,
Yeah.
And that was it. That was my epiphany moment. That was my holy fuck. So I went to rehab. I was in rehab about 3 weeks or so. And when I got out, I fell into a wicked, deep, dark depression. And that's when she came out big time. She was not going to be shut the fuck up. That's it. She's out. And so I talked to the girl that I was with at the time, and she seemed all on board about supporting me, this, that, and whatever. We actually picked up and moved to Massachusetts because Massachusetts, Mass Health would have paid for all of the care that I needed. So we picked up. We got rid of the house that we were renting. She had full custody of her kids. I had my kids, and we moved. We moved to Massachusetts. And October of 2016 is when I started my transition with Fenway Health. And a month later, I started hormones. And I first remember dressing, it was about the time I started taking hormones. I wouldn't do anything until I could do something, no matter what. Didn't matter what it was. I wasn't going to be me until I could be me. Because up until I was 30, I had no idea you could even transition. Like, I didn't even know it was a thing because all the psychologists I ever talked to never, ever brought it up. And so October 2016, I go to Fenway Health. We talked. They put me on spironolactone, which is a testosterone suppressant. Back in the 1950s, it was given for blood pressure.
So you went in full bore on this.
I did. Yeah, I mean, like I said, she was supporting me. I mean, everything was good. We had talked to the kids. The kids were all right, and so we were going to do this, And so November, I started taking, it was 2 milligrams sublingually underneath my tongue of a hormone estrogen. And then I started to dress as myself when I felt like me a little bit, And 6 months later, I ended up homeless. Yeah.
Kind of hard to go through transition and be homeless.
It was, but I continued.
So when you walk out the first time with female outfit on, presenting as female, you're like, oh, this is it.
I felt incredibly stupid.
Because it wasn't a relief or anything like that?
It was for me personally, but of course, me being me and me having, being raised the way I was, like, wow, what does everybody else think? And I still think like that a lot, and she'll tell you about that. I still think like that a lot. I always worry about what everybody else thinks, but yet I don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks, which is the crazy part.
It's what you think.
You're right. You're right. But I mean, it's insane. So she actually ended up leaving me anyway. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother show. But she ended up leaving me. I was homeless for about a year. I lived in my truck with my dog, my little dog Taco.
Where were your kids at this point?
My daughter was living with her grandmother at the time because she wanted to go to the high school that she was going to, and if she had lived with me, she couldn't have because it was too far away. And my son was living with me, going to that school, in that town because I kept driving because I worked in that town, so it wasn't a big deal. I just dropped him off. I'd pick him up in the afternoon when I was out. He'd go to his grandmother's in the meantime. Life was great. I mean, after I went homeless, I had to drop him off. It was the hardest fucking thing for me to do was drop my son off. It's like, here I am, I'm taking care of him for the last, 4 or 5 years, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it was. And now I've got to drop him off at his mother's and tell his mother, I can't take care of him. I need you to watch him. That was probably one of the hardest moments of my life. Fuck the transition. That wasn't bad. But dropping off my kid, that was the worst.
At your core, you're still a parent.
That's right.
All right. And you still love your kids.
Absolutely.
And the last thing you ever want to do to your kids is disappoint them.
I would do anything for my kids today. And that fucks my parenting later on in life, but I would do anything for my kids today, anytime.
So you're homeless, trying to still continue with the transition.
Yes.
How's it going for you? Is it working?
Well, I mean, I'm doing all right. I mean, I wasn't eating much. I mean, I couldn't afford to eat. I could barely afford to drive, I was eating once every 3 days, but at least I was driving, and I was drinking.
Keep your girlish figure that way.
Yeah. Well, by the time I was done being homeless, I was like 150 pounds. I was really light and skinny. And after about a year, I got attached to a girl who I met on plentyoffish.com, and I grabbed on the very first thing that would show me any sort of love, because I spent all that time just trying to find a home, I tried selling my body just to eat. I mean, anything I could just to get a fucking meal. I was so hungry.
To men or women?
I didn't care.
Really?
I didn't care. I just stand out downtown somewhere. Anywhere I could.
Desperation will do weird things to you.
It will. And the only thing that stopped me was a priest, actually, pastor. He walked up to me that night and he said, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm hungry. I got to eat, He goes, well, I'm blah, blah, blah from such and such a church. He goes, how about I buy you a dinner? And so he bought me a dinner. And he gave me $100. He said, don't go sell yourself. And so I didn't. And I was able to just continue to move place to place to place, just kind of working at little mom and pop shops, I was a mechanic, so I was little mom and pop shops, just doing little jobs here, little jobs there, just enough to move to the next place, And like I said, I grabbed the first thing that gave me any sort of attention, and that would be really bad for me because it ended up being an abusive relationship. She was physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive. Used my transition against me quite a bit. And so I was with her for a few years. And then in late 2018, I decided, you know what? I'm going to detransition.
This episode was just too much to put into one full hour. So we're going to break it up into two. Thank you for watching part 1. Part 2 is coming up right now. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn.
OnlyFans.
Follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. Stay tuned for next week. Part 2 is coming right up.
You're not going to want to miss it.